Now, today I'm going to go through some cryptoeconomic examples. One, I want to go over what an agent-based model is. This is a fairly mathematical economic term, but it actually is at the heart of why and how people interact with environments and their decisions and behaviors while interacting with price in these assets and crypto. So one, the motivation is how can we understand these complex dynamics of blockchain networks? How can we optimize those networks? And how can we study the robustness and the resilience of a blockchain? How can they become sustainable? How can we use them for long periods of time rather than just pump and dump schemes that many see in the media? So agent-based modeling is really the study of the behavior of blockchains at a granular level. They help identify factors that contribute to their performance and security. They really are a combination of policies, interventions on blockchains without implementing them in the real world. So instead of launching a network today, launching a token, launching an incentive structure, and just doing it cold without any prior data or knowledge or how to interact, these agent-based models can help you understand how people will interact with that token price, how they will interact with that NFT asset, how they will interact with getting certain rewards or distribution of money going to a treasury, going to a company, going to token holders, as I mentioned. And these model interactions between agents, which are people like you and I, in a dynamic and evolving environment like Ethereum, like in Filecoin, like in Cosmos, and those different phenomena that happen when they interact in those groups. A simple example is kind of like chess, right? When you're playing chess, you go towards a reward. Similar also with walking, right? You use a tracking device that is on your arm, such as a Fitbit or an Apple Watch, and you have certain rewards where they tell you how many steps you have. And you may get discounts on fitness apparel or things you do or lower insurance claims, right? Every action has a risk and a reward. And so in these agent-based models, you can measure out how exactly people are being rewarded and what risks are available. So what does this have to do with cryptoeconomics? Well, there are both positive actors and negative actors in all of these different environments. And you get a sense of modeling out, kind of like a digital twin, of who and how people interact in these native environments. So for one, I'm going to go over an example within the Filecoin economy. Filecoin is a decentralized data storage network. So instead of having to just get data storage from a centralized provider like AWS or Google Cloud provider, you can go to individual people who host data storage or storage providers, and they can be able to grant you or lease you storage to hold your data, to hold your videos, to hold your content, whatever it may be. And in these, we had examined in an agent-based model risk-averse agents, nefarious agents, and normal agents. So you measure and analyze what people can potentially do as agents, and then, like I said, you measure out the environment as well. So in here, within Filecoin, you have the network state, the global forecast, and the external environment within the Filecoin model, and then I'll describe what two agents typically do in these ecosystems when they have certain price or they have certain amount of capital to deploy in these networks. The network outputs in Filecoin are the network, pretty much the power, like how many terabytes or petabytes you have to actually deploy to the network. There's minting. So minting, when you mint the actual storage, that is actually minted in a Filecoin token. So the token is a representation of the data storage you actually get. And then there's a supply, there's a locked-in or circulating supply, where you get certain rewards every month, every week, every quarter, every certain amount of years for actually hosting and storing that data. There's forecasts on here, right? So within the forecast, we actually predict what price will look like over a certain amount of months, over a certain amount of years, quarters, whatever it may be. And then there's the agent level outputs, and this is rewards distribution. So if some people commit a certain amount of power to the network, they will get in return a certain amount of funds back to them. And the environment there is the discount rate for storing Filecoin specifically. So to go over the network state at first, there's a bunch of math here, but it just really states that as power, or what they call power in this ecosystem is called sectors. So the more sectors you commit over time, per year, per month, per time, it goes into the circulating supply, and these are how the rewards and the distribution is calculated. Then in the global forecast. to create a global forecast, we base it on current trends. What will the next 3 years look like? And we'll go through different scenarios as maximum value, median value, and minimum value of how and who can actually make money in this ecosystem. Then there's the minting rate. We think about and predict how much different power will add to the network over time, and show a client like Filecoin, the foundation, and users there how they could potentially benefit if they added more power into the network. And then there's rewards for sector forecasts. And the sectors are the amount of storage you commit, you then get X amount of rewards over time. So we show projection quantiles for that, for users to understand. And then the external environment, this is the fill supply, like I mentioned, and the exchange rates. So price forecasts are provided and modeled out so that you can be able to see those differences. And in here, there was 2 agents that we found most common within Filecoin. One we like to call a dollar cost average agent. It's really much a person where price goes up a little bit, mostly around 20 to 30%. Then they take it out, they take their rewards out, they still commit storage, but then they usually do this in a constant rate, like 20% up, 20% down, and they're doing that every so often. But it does not showcase specific forecasting information when they onboard power. They're doing this little by little over time. Another agent we found was a net present value agent, where they make locally optimal decisions using external environment forecasts. So to summarize a lot of this, with other people that are storage providers in the United States, they will follow what other people do regionally as far as investment advice is concerned. Whereas if someone's based in Singapore or based in Hong Kong, then they have different locally optimized trading strategies within committing more storage into the network or taking out their rewards. So their actions and their activity within the network is based on the local distribution of people in their network, or based on whether it's environmental or others that have similar storage capacity like they do as well. And then, so that's the agent-based modeling example. Any questions on agent-based models first before I go into other things? Agent-based models, I will say, is one of the most common services we provide as a group to people like within Ethereum, within DeFi, within Cosmos especially, and understanding like when they do launch a token, how these things could potentially operate. But again, it's not financial advice, it's just a simulation or model. It's not a guarantee. So one, I want to showcase you some research we did about a year ago in this case called the ETH Uncle Maker attack. So when Ethereum was migrating from proof of work to proof of stake, there was a question of, is it possible to actually manipulate proof of work chains? Like, why would we even need to go into proof of stake? Everything's working fine right now. Yes, environmentally, it's not great, and but we have more origination. You have an attribute to ownership per real work. Researchers in different communities in Ethereum wanted to find this out. So us with a group of researchers from Tel Aviv actually did research on, can Ethereum blocks give first evidence of a consensus layer attack, because we want to claim that proof of stake was actually safer than proof of work. And in doing this, the problem was specifically in understanding mining difficulty in Ethereum. So the difficulty of mining the current block changes on the fly in Ethereum decreases the longer the time that has passed without anyone mining a new valid block. Typically, you'll see in a prior example, every single 10 seconds is when a new block in Ethereum is passed. And due to the certain pool that you're actually mining blocks in, that could actually change in the distribution of your rewards. So this is actually this method is made so that you can ensure that interblock times won't get too high in expectation. And well, what could go wrong? Well, what could go wrong is you could actually timestamp out the competition. So there's this theory that the last person to mint within the 10 seconds of a block actually has the most access to understand the mempool and take advantage of that mempool and timestamp someone out. So within that mining difficulty, if I'm going to go to the next slide, we actually showed in this honest miner strategy. So actually, I'll simplify this because this is a little bit too technical for a lot of people. So in this, there's something called a parent block, and then there's something called an uncle block. The parent block is the main block that goes onto the chain and gets passed. Then there's a potential uncle making block that holds a transaction, holds a place in line, but doesn't actually get added to the blockchain. The long story short of this, within the uncle transaction of the chain, every single 9 seconds in this F2 pool, there was no action actually being taken onto the blockchain. It was skipped every single 9 seconds, as you can see here on the graphic. Every single 9, 18, 27, 36 seconds. No funds were being pulled out of the F2 pool, yet there was a lot of funds being taken out right before that. What gives? What's going on? It turns out there's many different pools you can actually mine within the Ethereum blockchain. The creators of the F2 pool actually said, yes, we do this on purpose. We take out these funds before every single 9-second timestamp because we want to be able to secure the network. But that's not very decentralized. That's very centralized. It's someone taking advantage of a mempool and an entire network. And that's them making the decision rather than the actual community doing it. So we found a vulnerability within the Ethereum proof of work chain where someone wasn't able, where someone was actually taking advantage of the mempool without actually disclosing to the community. And for other pools, for example, like an Ethermine or Hyvion or whatever, they were always taking out every single second, not every single 9 seconds. And this was after an analysis we did on many different mechanism designs and ways you could actually mine from the pool. And this was from simulation modeling technology that we actually created. So one of the lessons there is don't always trust the pools you go into without knowing the full facts of it. Part of the research and part of the design that we provide as a team and many in the cryptoeconomic space is understanding these protocols at its deep level so that you aren't making investment choices that you don't truly know about. So part of why we like to do our job is to make sure everyone's as educated as possible in these spaces.
So are you familiar with like the rare sats, the exotic sats, the vintage sats, the pizza sats that are
Sats? The
yeah,
sats.
like attributes, like they're what Bitcoin ordinals get inscribed on?
Oh, yeah. So I'm a little bit aware of that. I haven't dove deep into it, but yes, like ordinals in particular, I think it's like the Taproot team in particular, they have certain strategies that they have done to upload different assets onto the blockchain. Unless you know how and when and the frequency they're doing that, I would probably want to know those details before getting into those assets or owning them. Yeah. All right, so another one I want to describe to you all is designing multidimensional pricing via this EIP called 1559. One of the main problems within gas. So who here is familiar with gas and what that is in crypto and protocols? Awesome. So typically though, gas is all, like the prices of gas come together in one set fee, where it takes in the gas or the compute fee, the protocol fee, the transaction fee, and a whole lot of other things you do. And they kind of average it out for the most part. They don't create separate lanes for this. And originally there was work by Theo Diamandis and a bunch of others from MIT that said, what if we separated out the actual fee structure? So you could separate what actual adding assets to the blockchain would be, what the transaction fee would be, and could this make it cheaper or better for the protocol and users, depending on the use case and what they do? And we wanted to create and research fee markets with fixed relative prices that could be more dimensional and actually give gas into lanes that were more organized for what they're actually attributing for. So in particular, like there's mempool fees, there's secondary market fees, but there wasn't a way to separate both the computation and the bandwidth and the transaction throughput that was going on in blockchains. That's why so many of these were so expensive. There were too many orthogonal resources that weren't priced separately. So we wanted to create specific fee markets that could showcase these prices a little bit more easily. So without the math here, pretty much we wanted to decouple the utilization of a network from the network fees to the transaction fees. And our key result was that prices that minimize G charge the transaction producers exactly the marginal cost faced by the network. The long story short of what that was is we found that gas prices too much when convoluted with fees, with transaction fees, were actually becoming exponentially more expensive than they needed to be. As you can see here, this is what multidimensional fees increased throughput for the protocol could be if they were separated a little bit. So The multidimensional prices are the purple line. The red lines are the uniform prices. So there could be more transactions or more benefit that goes to the actual protocol than wasted spend. There was less wasted spend that would go into having multidimensional fees than uniform prices and fees. As you can see here too, they separate more cleanly, and you get better results of gas and money that come to the protocol that can be distributed out to all users than when you had it as one uniform price. And so the conclusion, you should choose your objective function by the network designer and create optimal prices for each and all actions that gas is being charged for. And so we wanted to take another step further and see what could multidimensional gas lanes outside of Ethereum look like. So there's other protocols that do other things, such as like Filecoin I mentioned earlier. They add distributed storage, or they add decentralized storage to a network. Other people can add to compute. Other people may want to add design or other type of digital acts and choices onto a network. How can you be able to do this? So recently, this past week, my team actually participated in a hackathon at Cornell Tech to understand if you could create multidimensional prices outside of use cases of Ethereum. And because within gas prices, they have this first price auction problem, where the first price that comes up with the uniform price fee, that's just the one they accept and it's never challenged, right? But if you were to create and separate out those gas lanes and create it more multidimensionally, you may be able to get people that want to, or users that want to interact within a blockchain or a network or a protocol in specific ways that, one, they can afford and what they want to contribute to the network. So the problem is, one, there's volatile transaction fees. We see it a lot with NFTs in particular. You upload an NFT into a network and the asset you're paying for, the gas fee, is more than what you're actually buying the NFT for. That is a huge problem that doesn't make sense for anyone wanting to get into a network. There's also inefficiencies with the winner's curse, where you may be the first bidder of an auction to receive the auction, and you pay $50 for the actual asset, but the real world value of that asset is like $30 or $40. So you paid more for the asset because it's in an auction it was more of a competitive bet to get to it than the actual real market value. And we want to try and take that out of the equation there. Then there's the unpredictable miner incentive without a block reward and prolonged economic censorship. Like, there's more well-researched people that have more money or more assets that could just outbid anybody and win in an auction to win the price over. That's not great for, one, solo providers, individual people who want to be part of these markets, as well as, it makes whales more richer, which crypto has had a history of doing that, but we thought there could be another way to do that. So in comes 1559, where we separate token and gas fees, as I mentioned before. This is just some more math, this is how it's calculated. The benefits of it is more predictable fees for users, it's more sustainable miner revenue, and the economic incentive becomes more expensive, and that's just not beneficial for these networks. But what if there are different types of messages that are sent by different groups with different priorities, like I said, storage providers and whatnot. So we want to tackle these multidimensional mechanisms. And many people go to single gas lanes, let's divvy it up, let's switch it up. And as a visual, this is what gas lanes are when it's multidimensional on the right. This is what it's like on the left. And the rationale is you want to aim for different use cases to not compete for gas. Not every use case will want to compete for gas. Ethereum does, in a sense, because it goes for the first come, first serve fee. That is how Ethereum settles transactions. The highest fee in Ethereum, that is the highest price, gets settled. But what if that is not your use case, or that is not your value prop? You may want to do it elsewise. And you want to separate that users should only compete with only the same category and type of base fee. The two options we considered were a transaction type or opcode. And opcode is really just machine language that enables you to do something within a blockchain or a technical network. And we assigned a whole transaction to a lane, specifying each opcode lane, so you can be able to price and bid on each of those gas lanes separately. And we found a couple of methods to do so by separating the targets and separating the max gas limit. It's really hard to separate the minimum gas limit Obviously, you could do the minimum gas limit is 0, but then your price will just go to 0 because you're multiplying it over time and bidding in these different type of auctions and price mechanisms. So what was the one, how can you find the minimum gas limit that also gives a maximum limit that's beneficial for the network to you? And these are how we propose it and applied it to other use cases within Cosmos, Cardano, Polygon in particular. Multidimensional gas lanes actually improved user price as well as improving network financing, where money comes into the network just as beneficially. And things like Filecoin, it also was a benefit too. But in use cases of, I think it was Flow, like NFT trading platforms, they were not as beneficial because Flow is more so trying to optimize for transaction throughput rather than anything else, and this type of mechanism really wouldn't benefit there. And that's just more details on our specs. But some of our final remarks and findings we saw were that you may have to adjust the mechanism depending on throughput for like a Flow blockchain, right? So if the bandwidth of the asset is then getting priced out and having a gas fee towards it, different assets have different compute and different energy that goes up into uploading to the blockchain. So you want to think about that. We also thought about creating different EIP mechanisms for each lane. So you can be more not dynamic there, kind of like with the dynamic NFT question earlier. How can you dynamically price out an NFT differently? And we also think there's more critical analysis that needs to be done, especially when it comes to power-based actions within a digital act, and how to price that out would be a little bit different. And then finally, I'll go over my last example and open up for questions. This will be more interesting for the NFT community here, but wanted to show you some research that was around gradual Dutch NFT auctions and how they are being created. So what are the goals really of an NFT auction? You want to sell a batch of NFTs, but don't really know the price, right? So someone will mint or create 10,000 different NFTs, and they'll say, yeah, they're priced at, this one's going to be priced at $10, but this one's going to be priced at $5. You're kind of just guessing, and you're not really understanding why or how you're doing it. So is there a way to truly do this? To create desired data for NFT auctions? Well, one, there's a couple of problems with that. One, they have to be incentive compatible for the buyer. They also have to be incentive compatible for the seller. You want to have price discovery like you do on eBay or like you do in stock trading, where you can understand supply and demand of how many people are holding exact shares, what the price is on the open market. And an auction needs to be computationally tractable. There could be no off-chain side agreements. You don't really want people on the side colluding on price or whales just bumping up the price and then wash trading for people to dump on retail. That's not really something that benefits any of these communities and groups. And adversaries shouldn't be able to manipulate the auction without breaking cryptographic primitives. So having these things on chain allow you to understand the relationships between many different parties across the world, rather than just wash trading happens all the time in stocks today on the NASDAQ and other type of platforms and portfolios. It's just not it's not common to everyday users about these type of things. But can we get ideal single item NFT auctions? According to Malonis from Colombia, we actually really can do that. There is no single item NFT auction mechanism as considered by the definition that satisfies both the bidder and the seller. So we really can't do these in NFTs, but there is some hope on understanding these markets. And so Paradigm came out with this research. Paradigm Capital, they're a venture capital firm based all over the world, that did a study on gradual Dutch auctions. So a lot of times there's more of a sequential, like NFT launches that's peak performance, and then every so often there's another one comes up, another one comes up, another one comes up, but it kind of cascades down in a formation that I'll show right here. So pretty much you have an auction and it cascades down to its base price. It peaks, it goes down, peaks, goes down, peaks, goes down. And there's no real dynamic posted price mechanism for it. Buyers are offered the take it or leave it price, and they usually, it's very hyped up in the beginning, and then usually when the asset's sold, there's no one like really claiming or wanting to try and buy it afterwards. And so it's very unfortunate that these are just the mechanisms that come with NFT auctions. But there was some research trying to understand if you could spoof the paradigm auction. So can demand and supply at time t be modified? And can you be able to release an asset at a specific time where it's at its maximum or minimum value when you initially launch it, and then over time can you increase value in the supply curve? And typically the auctioneer has to buy first the R auction's paying, and then have prices go up, ensuring the cheapest auction available to the buyer's price. So you can kind of reverse equilibria a little bit depending on when and how you release that asset. So this means the original gradual Dutch auction is not incentive compatible for sellers. And unfortunately, this is how most NFT auctions are today. There's not a true way to understand the supply and demand curves of them today. And so you're kind of just guessing when you're buying these assets. But what can happen or help is if you think about the best price for a similar asset, like the winner's curse, as you see all the way over here on the right, try and guess, like by looking at previous assets and their interdependencies, you can kind of find the median price of what that asset is truly worth. So what I'm trying to say is don't buy the peak price or the initial price of an NFT as it goes all the way up. Try and wait a little bit to try to then see the real value of that. It's part of the winner's curse, and this is a theory in economics that states that the person who wins the bid of the auction never is the one who gets the real value of the asset. So you need to make sure that current buyers don't regret buying their assets at the highest price. Be more mindful of these things as you're in these NFT communities and try not to get robbed. So that is my presentations on economic models and some mechanisms. Happy to go over different details of them and any questions, but like I said, I'm the ecosystem lead at CryptoEconLab. We hold quarterly research seminars at some of the largest conferences in crypto in the world. So we hosted one at ETH Denver in March. We hosted one at Consensus in Austin. And then our next one is going to be at ECC in Paris. We have Barnaby from the Ethereum Foundation, Akaki from Off-Chain Labs /Arbitrum, as well as Danning from Flashbots, Matthias from Harvard, and a number of different people who are going to be presenting at our side event at ECC. I want more people from Philadelphia actually to attend these events because one, I know it's hard and it's like expensive to travel and go to these global events and whatnot, but there is so much talent in our region that actually work in crypto but don't show up on the global stages, and I would love to have us more involved in some of these global happenings because Philadelphia is great and it's cool to interact with these local communities, but crypto is global finance and crypto is global collective action, and if you're not interacting with global people around the world in these environments, you're just not really making anything very tremendously meaningful. So I'd love to see more people from Philadelphia in these global events. And that's it from me. Mike McCoy here, happy to answer any questions you guys have around economics and crypto. Yeah.
So in these like agent-based models, it's clear that there's a lot of different dimensions of multiple agents or even different markets for different gas lanes. How do you measure accuracy of a model that has that many moving parts?
Yeah, so a lot of times there's public data that shows how these assets performed over a short time horizon, unfortunately, because crypto is with only, crypto price can last anywhere between 8 to 10 years for most assets or even shorter. So you kind of take that historical data, you level parameters, whether it's minting, burning, vesting, locking of that asset, of that token price, and then you measure different fidelities of, like I mentioned, maximum, median, min, and even in betweens. That's the best way to kind of do it, is with that public data. You can also then look and try and compare it to traditional assets or like technology stocks or other type prices, but that's typically the way to do it.
So basically, instead of measuring like the behavior of your model against.
So that's how you measure the environment.
You measure the actual price instead of trying to match it.
You can do both. Like you can do the environment to the actual price, or you can you also have to measure the distribution of that asset. So if that asset is initially they're giving out 1,000 tokens per month, and then over 2-3 years they're giving only 50 to 100, right? You measure that out in the parameters as well. So it's understanding the environments, and then Then you then measure out the average behaviors of the people in that environment and how they interact.
Have you seen any kind of like developments towards standardization when it comes to like some of the tokenomic models? It's like, I guess like as a lawyer and having approached this economically in many contexts that aren't Web3, I think there's a few models that work really well, and then there's just a bunch of noise. And like from my perspective, like when I read these white papers that have all this economic complexity, I just think that it's like sounds like a tax nightmare, and honestly, also not very useful for any purpose that I can identify.
Yeah.
So like, have you seen folks start to stop doing that? Because all I see when I see that is just like I said, a tax nightmare, and it's so hard to find a benefit.
Yeah, so there are a lot of like, oh, we're the DeFi killer, we're the Ethereum killer, and they'll create tokenomics. So the question was, are there standard mechanism design in this space that is not trying to do economic complexity? That a lot of them are copycats of each other, unfortunately. There are a lot of different mech designs that will not follow fundamentals or principles that get them to A, B, C, or D outcomes. But yeah, I would say probably about 80% of them are mostly copycats or trying to add one type of. So the thing is, if you really think of fundamentals, there's the trilemma, right, of like privacy, decentralization, and security, decentralization, and speed. And some people try to optimize for 2 out of 3 or whatever. I think most of the time, if you have fundamentals and you only try to optimize for 1 out of the 3, while maybe sacrificing some of the other 2, those use cases tend to be more valuable and like focus on certain people. But yes, most of the space is copycats and like, we're doing this, but it's going to kill Ethereum, or it's going to kill Solana, it's going to kill Polygon. But yeah, I have seen. I don't know if standardization necessarily needs to be the answer though either, because there's so much untapped research and potential now when you have potential users who have both equity and both ability to mint and burn the price. Like that has macroeconomic implications. I think there's too many open research questions in the field to ever have concrete standardized answers, at least today. Because when you mint and burn, you're literally minting and burning whoever put the majority of their fiat currency into that network. So if 70% of your users are from the US, you literally just may have affected global macroeconomics in some type of way by minting or burning as a community. If you have like billions and billions of dollars, but I think crypto is just under $1 trillion of value or worth now. But when it was like 3 trillion, it could have actual implications on monetary policy in emerging economies. Like think about like Venezuela or El Salvador or some lower economies. Like those could be drastic impacts to their economy. Any other questions? Yeah.
Going into video game design, or kind of looking at the way let's say you just have like 100 people playing a game and the type of token economics that would facilitate some sort of interaction inside video games. Are you looking at there at all?
Yeah, there are a lot of beneficial projects within like game finance and GameFi, and there's so many people on Twitter that have on their bios that they're tokenomics experts within GameFi. I think the most thing that people optimize for in games is throughput speed and lowering the gas prices for people to interact in these games. Because like the main goal, I think, for economics within games is to not ruin the experience but create a new financial opportunity. And that's just really hard when you have crypto native principles that charge for things that you don't want to be charged for. And so I think most of it's just coming from the throughput and speed, and if you can make that more efficient, GameFi and game financials are going to be a lot more interesting. Any other questions? Thanks, guys.
All right, we're gonna kick off our next session with the community sharing of stories, and to kick it off, I'm gonna introduce Chris, who's our digital asset leader for EisnerAmper.